In a world filled with conflict, in a universe comprised of differences, there's one thing that absolutely everything shares in common. We all exist. Including two guys named Jack and Michael, who like to chat about that very thing over a good cup of coffee. Let's pay them a visit, shall we?
Existence Brewing.
Just waiting for Jack. He's always the late one. Oh, there you are.
I'm here. You caught me ordering from the evil Bezos.
Oh, I thought maybe this place had like a mobile app that we could like order our order ahead of time, and then we could just walk in so we wouldn't have to talk to any humans except for the ones that we choose.
Yeah, don't you love that? No, I'm not much of a mobile app kind of guy. I'm the old dude in the room, so mobile apps don't really work for me. Plus, my phone couldn't possibly handle the pressure since it's so old, and everything's just old right now. But so are my tastes, apparently, because what I'm having to place an order from the evil Amazonian empire for is currant jelly. I assume you know what that is?
Oh, yeah.
So you can't just walk into the store and buy currant jelly anymore. You have to, it's like a special order item. There's plenty of places that make it, but Smucker's, just off the shelf, they don't make it anymore. So currant jelly was always my favorite jelly as a kid. And you know how sometimes your body or your mind or some combination of the two, I guess they're one and the same, just conjures this craving for something you haven't had in forever. And so I just get this craving for red currant jelly.
Now, is this
it was my favorite
thing?
Growing up as a kid. No. Okay. They had it all the time, and it was my favorite as a kid. And Mom used to keep it in the house just for me when we have biscuits or toast.
Nice.
And you can't just walk in, like I said, and get like the Smucker's red currant jelly anymore. It has to be a special order item. So I wasn't able to find it when I was vacationing recently. Not that I looked that hard, but didn't stumble across it. And so finally just had to bite the bullet and try some unknown British brand and then deal with all this weirdo stuff. I never realized how much it was used for recipes, but I was reading in my searches for it. I was reading this Reddit post someone did asking, why can't you just walk into the store and buy it anymore? And of course, that's a dumb question because the bottom line is the bottom line. Like, they're not making any money on it anymore, so it doesn't pencil. And that's the way companies are anymore. Used to be they'd keep making stuff, it seemed like, just because they had a small fan base but hell, they got rid of the Choco Taco because it didn't pencil anymore. And then the public outrage was about, as much as if they were to like depose the Pope or something, for God's sake.
I wonder if it's more expensive to make a Choco Taco or a jar of currant jelly. I would imagine that a jar of currant jelly is pretty cheap to make.
Well, some idiot in the Reddit post that this person had made answered back and said, well, no one puts currant jelly on toast ever. It's always used for recipes. And I'm like, bullshit, they don't. I ate it as a kid on toast and biscuits and everything growing up all the time. It was my favorite jelly. So, I am fine with sweeping religious and, other generalizations. I don't care, but don't fuck with currant jelly. That's like, don't make a sweeping generalization about my favorite jelly saying, oh, no one ever puts that on toast. They just use it that's not true. I put it on just about anything and everything. So anyway, that's what you caught me in the middle of. I was ordering my red currant jelly finally so I can shut up about it. My girlfriend's going to be pleased. She's going to be like, oh, thank God. Did the red currant jelly get on to hear about it anymore?
We need to make sure that Jack always has a good supply of currant jelly. That's a must.
Well, it was either that or freezer jam. Because I didn't know my grandparents too well. Maybe it had to have been my mom, but she She had a Mormon background, not a practitioner. She just had, parents. She was sort of from Mormonville. So you know how, again, to make a sweeping generalization about theology, as I just said, here I go. They're all sort of doomsday preppers, or at least the old-fashioned ones were. You always had a pantry that was well-stocked for the rapture, or whatever. No, so I was just going to say, so like any good, Mormon daughter, when she made this freezer jam, she made enough to feed the Republican Army, for God's sake. So I ate on that for years. I ate it on everything: pancakes, waffles, biscuits, toast. I mean, everything. And it was delicious. And when we finally ran out, I was sad, because good homemade freezer jam is hard to come by in my world these days.
Well, and what a wonderful Halloween costume you have on today, too. What exactly are you going for as Halloween today?
Well, if you must see, Michael's putting you on because you're not actually able to see, but I never do Halloween. I haven't since I was a kid. I've never trick-or-treated in my life, not even as a little munchkin. I was weirded out by it. There was something about it. And again, it was probably those two Aquarian planets that said, all the other kids are doing it. I'm not fucking joining in. It's not going to happen. So it was probably that. But there was also something about masquerading that I felt was, I don't know, sort of disingenuous in some ways, perhaps. I don't know. I was always an overthinker. But I've had some good Halloween costume ideas over the years. Now, when my ex-wife worked for a medical center, she was being pressured to go to one of those company parties, and thank God she hated those like I did, so we didn't have to go. But I said, okay, I'm only going if I can wear this costume. And she was like, she knows me because, how can you not? You're married to me, poor thing. And so she said, what's your costume idea? I said, so I want to get like either Dr. Scrubs or like a really nice suit, some kind of combination of like Dr. Scrubs with a tie underneath, or Dr. Scrubs with like a suit vest over the top, and then maybe like that thing that they don't ever wear it anymore, but like that miner's thing that they put on their forehead. What the hell was that even for? Like, in case they forget who they're...
I think what you're referring to is the little eye cover that they put over their eye when they're looking... They pull out their little, it's like a device that has a light on it, and they're looking at your eyes, and they like put something down over their eye. It's like an eye patch or something. I know what you're talking about.
It was central to the forehead.
Yes.
It was like a miner's helmet, and it was silver disc thing.
Yes.
Some combination of doctor and probably lawyer or just some suited person. And then I just wanted to like paint, like spatter it with blood just everywhere, just blood, and then carry around like this big bloody pen.
Like American Psycho or something?
With blood like dripping from the tip of this like really nice fountain pen or something, and then the blood smeared suit and blood on the cheeks, like spatter and stuff like that. And she's just like, okay, I don't get it. Like, what would that be? And I said, then when people come up and they say, wow, that's a grisly costume, what are you supposed to be? I say, an HMO. And my blood is on your hands.
Oh, brother. Well, speaking of Halloween, I used to love Halloween because I would dress up 364 days of the year. So when I was a kid, I would have costumes, all different types of costumes. In fact, my mom actually referred to me as one of the members of the Village People, because at one point I was a construction worker, I was an Indian, I was a cowboy, I was everybody in the the Village People. And so I love dressing up for Halloween because I loved wearing costumes. But I also really enjoyed horror movies as a young kid. And I was going to play a little game with you if we could jump in. And because, when I think of Jack Hansen, the first thing I think of is there's a guy who likes surprises, because I know you really love a good pop quiz.
Sure, absolutely. By the way, couple things. Current girlfriend loves horror movies, always have. So I've seen many more than I had ever expected to, that I had never seen before in the last 2 years since we've been together. And the other thing, real quick, on the note of the Village People, a shout out to Ray Stevens, who my opinion was the best Village person, if not for anything else. The fact that he went on to record the song Cat's Eye for the movie of the same title, Stephen King.
There you go.
Phenomenal song. I love that song. Absolutely love that song.
I thought that movie was great too, by the way. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So this is just kind of made up by yours truly on the fly. So what I want to do is I'm going to read you the plot of a horror movie, and then I want you to try to guess which horror movie it is. And some of them are very easy, some of them not so easy. So if you get the correct answer, it's going to be one of these. And if you get the wrong answer, it's going to be one of these. Okay.
So this is similar to that Audible test that they give you when you have to go to work, like as a night watchman for the subway company or something.
Yeah.
When they put your hand up, like, there it is.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I heard that. Do I get the job? I heard it. Do I get it now?
Yeah.
I don't get the job. I don't. When do I start? Do I go to work tomorrow? Can I come in today? I could really use the money.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so here we go.
Okay.
Are you ready
Challenge
for this?
accepted. Yes.
Okay, so here we go. The first horror movie.
God, the ticking clock, all the pressure.
3 film students vanish after traveling into a Maryland forest. And a film...
Blair Witch Project.
Oh, man, that was too easy. I would have gotten that one, too. Okay, and the next one is a mysterious death surrounding an American ambassador. Could the child...
The Omen.
Oh, jeez.
Do I need to let you finish, or...
Oh, no, you can say it whenever.
Okay.
Uh...
That's what they all say to me.
Okay, so a research team in Antarctica is haunted by...
The Thing.
Wow. Too good.
I thought you were going to be hard.
I thought they were going to be harder, too, but...
Yeah, I also hear that a lot.
Okay. All right, a family home becomes the center of...
The Amityville Horror.
Is that your final answer?
Well, no, apparently it's not right, but it was a good first guess.
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay, okay.
So a family home becomes the center of paranormal activity that opens a doorway to the other side. There's a key word, the other side. With
Poltergeist?
help, they must, yes, poltergeist.
Okay. There's a lot of, now that I think of it, there's a lot of family homes that are the center of horror activity. So
yeah, here's another one that centers around a family. A family heads to an isolated hotel for the winter where a sinister presence influences the father into one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Very good. And where did my music go? Oh, come on, Mr. Producer.
I thought we fired Mr. Producer. Oh, that's right. We got the machine. It's like Mr. Coffee, but it's Mr. Producer. It does it automatically.
Yeah, we didn't pay for the really good AI, so we got the Mr. Producer instead. Okay.
The FI.
And here's your final one. A young couple trying to have a baby moves into an aging, ornate apartment building on Central Park West, where they find themselves surrounded by peculiar neighbors.
A Rosemary's Baby?
Congratulations, man! You are really good at this.
Wow, thanks. I was expecting some like really difficult ones from the underground or something like that, but yeah, like I said, I've seen all of those movies within the last 6 months, probably thanks to you know who. So there you go.
That's awesome. Oh, The Birds is also on this list. That was another fun one from my childhood. My mom was obsessed with that movie. We used to watch it all the time when she was ironing. The Birds.
Yeah, great ironing flick. I got to tell you, that's why I like watching more than like auspices of shitting pigeons everywhere when I'm ironing. It makes me feel.
It was either The Birds or Rebecca that she.
When I'm starching clothes, it's always Hitchcock. It's something. So
yeah.
So what then is what do you feel like? Because we talk about this all the time. Because like I'm not really afraid of any horror movies. Like, there is some graphic content that is disturbing to my amygdala, but I'm just not really afraid of any horror movies. I can't really think of things conceptually that bother me, but, you know, she's very different like that. There's a certain kind of movie that she finds scary. So I find, like, what I find scary is like, have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
No.
Mike Judge? Well, so it's a comedy, but to me it's frightening because it's supposed to be like a parody of what the future looks like, but we're already there. It's a bunch of morons running around doing what we do today. I mean, that to me is scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, documentaries about just everyday human behavior in Occidental society, that's a horror movie for me. But horror movies that are supposed to be scary, they don't really bother me because it's just like, this either is just far-fetched, I don't believe the concept, or even if it's close to something I believe, it's like, well, I'm protected from shit like that. So what do I care if a fictitious family is going down in a blaze of bloody horror? But what do you feel like? I mean, are you scared of movies like that? Do you have like a most scary movie of all time then?
Jack Henson, he lives a horror movie every day. I don't know about that. I would say any of those jump scare movies are ones that I don't like. I don't like the jump scare movies. The jump scare movies, you know which ones I'm talking about too. It's like the ones where you're literally sitting there watching a puppy frolic across some, and then all of a sudden it's like the puppy's dead and it has maggots coming out of its eye. And then it goes back to the puppy. I don't like the jump scare. And that's,
so the setups where you think everything's okay and suddenly somebody jumps out of the side of the picture or the room or the mirror or something.
I don't even know if it's that. I think it's more just like it's like an edit that's done where they just like they show the demon or whatever it is like just really quickly. And it's just like it's like an edit that they do, and it's only like 4 frames or something. And I hate those movies because I don't feel like they're creative. It's almost like they're like, oh yeah, we haven't really thought of anything else. So at least with The Shining, there's like a plot to it, and there's at least some kind of even though something bad's going to happen with the little twins. There's still, that moment where Danny's going around the corner and boom, he sees the twins. I feel like that's legitimate. But when you're just like watching something and then all of a sudden it flashes something in the screen, I hate those.
Yeah. I was really thankful that Oshkosh Bagosh never got around to using that as in their advertising campaign where he comes around the corner on the big wheel and suddenly it's just, come and shop with us, Danny. It's like they were sitting on that. No, like I'm thinking about a movie to me, but it's not a scary movie. It's a good film, and it's Bill Pullman's Serpent and the Rainbow. But there are some parts in that are disturbing because, like, the being buried alive, like, that's a fear of mine. So any fictitious portrayal of being buried alive is going to be somewhat disturbing. It's like, oh, my God. It's like heights. It's like, I hate flying. So any movie where airplanes come apart and people fall, oh, God, that's dreadful. But the movie itself is typically not scary. I can't think of a movie that from start to finish just freaks me out. I'm sure there is one, but like I said, it's probably a Michael Moore film. Like it's not.
I would say any movie that or scene that involves children and children being either killed or like that scene in It when the clown is in the sewer, that used to just scare the shit out of
Georgie.
me. Yeah, he gets Georgie, and Georgie's is a sweet little guy. And I think anything where, children are involved with the demon or whatever, that's usually where I draw the line.
Well, there were 2 cinematic depictions of that scene from Stephen King's book. The first was from a made-for-TV movie of It back in the 90s. And God love any cast that has Harry Anderson and John Ritter because it featured both. So we love that. And that one is a little campy just based on who they cast. And it is a difficult, if you've ever read the book, I mean, they can't even begin to really get into the nuances in the new films they made. And they made 2 of them, and they still left out a lot of the backstory of It and how it came to be. Because there were 2 It's, actually, if anybody, is familiar. A lot of people read the book. But the new movie that came out, the newer one 6-7 years ago now, I saw that at the IMAX in Florida, actually, when I was living my miserable year there. One of the great, like, you could almost say in some ways that was like an autobiographical rendition of what I lived over 365 days there. near the Alabama border because it was similar. I wanted to stick my hand down the gutter drain most days.
Jack Hansen in the Panhandle.
But that was a graphic scene. I mean, tears the kid's arm off. And that is one of the things that I think horror filmmakers, like graphic violence being, done to, for lack of a better term, violent acts being committed on young females has always been. It's a tradition. Alfred Hitchcock invented that.
Right.
He's responsible for the R rating with Psycho. My mom used to tell stories about that movie because she worked at the theater at the time in Salt Lake City.
Oh.
And she said there had never been a movie like that ever had come out where they actually showed the knife, and the blood, and girls were freaked. They wouldn't walk home by themselves from the theater. And it really kicked off the motion picture industry's rating system because Hitchcock pushed the envelope with that. And then, of course, the envelope was way too far before too long. And the next thing you know, we have, Texas Chainsaw and all these other ones where it's just, but, young females have never been off limits for acts of grotesque violence. Children, on the other hand, have typically been left alone. I think that's pretty unusual. And that's why that scene is so disturbing because usually you just don't see depictions of violence against children. It's very rare. Like Spielberg could get away with it in an historical context, like in Schindler's List, for example. But I think violence against children in horror movies there are limits. There are thresholds where even filmmakers, they can't push it because it'll be a snuff film. They'll get an X rating. And by the way, there's a lot of movies that got an X rating before they got an R rating that were like, for example, RoboCop always comes to mind. Terribly violent movie, both of them actually, for 1 and 2, now that you go back and think about it. RoboCop actually had so much violence in it that they gave it an X rating and had to cut out some of the violence. And then what we were left with was like, wow, absolutely. And then the rules on profanity and pejorative language were so strict in the 80s and 70s that there were a number of films that received an X rating just for the profanity. And so you went back and cut out a bunch of the fucks. And like, for example, here's a movie that I think of when it comes to that rule all the time. Andrew Dice Clay's Ford Fairlane from, I think, 1991. When that came out, by that time, the Motion Picture Academy had far loosened its grasp on the F word. The word fuck could be used just so many times, though, so it couldn't be a laced tirade. They actually had a number. I don't remember what it was. It was like 54 or something. That was the threshold for fucks in a movie. If you went past that, you got an X. And so apparently they went past that by a few and had to go back, and they didn't want to scratch the scenes, so they dubbed them with the word fluckin'. So there's a few scenes, if you've seen that movie, where he actually will say, like, what? You didn't really think we'd kill the fluckin' koala band now, did you? And it's like, what is fluckin'? And then there's a fluck you that comes in there, too. So I don't know if they were just having fun with the ratings folks and thought that the audience would get it, but I remember it went over the heads of everybody in the audience because I saw that movie in the theater, actually. But, yeah. As far as horror, I think children have been off limits typically. But that's why movies with freakish children are scary. And also because children are freakishly scary in and of themselves. There's something about like small, not yet adult people that is wrong. Like clowns are just wrong. There's something wrong with them until they grow up. It's like, okay, you're Tony. But until then, you're like this freakish child. Yeah, well, I know we brought this up recently. NC-17, the rating NC-17 actually replaced the X rating in the 90s at some point. And there's not too many movies that have an NC-17 rating, which, of course, means no children under 17. And then, everybody knows I hope they know maybe they don't know what the letters stand for. G is for general audiences. P is parental guidance. PG-13 is kind of like, why even bother? Give us a fucking break. Don't straddle the line. PG-13 came out and suddenly it was parental guidance for those 13 and under or under 13. But it's just sort of like, just give it an R or a PG. Let's not vacillate too much here. So there's a lot of movies to me that PG-13,
there's a gray matter there, yeah.
It should be PG, and it's just really over, fastidious parents that are going to have a problem with this. Or it should be R. Let's face it, give this movie an R rating. That's Pirate's favorite rating, by the way. It's Halloween, giving me an R rating. So
Yeah.
And then there's X, of course, which the X rating is sort of just why even bother, because porn is rampant online. I mean, it's almost like online pornography just completely dismissed the misnomer of the X rating. Like why even bother? But X ratings used to be given for more than sexual content, even though that's what they became largely synonymous with. Like I said, there was pejorative language and violence as well to be considered.
Yeah, the ratings, I feel, have gotten a little more strict, I think past probably the 90s, because even the movie E.T., which was filmed in 82, has a rating of PG, but there's clearly a few curse words in E.T. that if they were to have made it in today's society, they probably wouldn't have those in there. And so I think there was kind of some leniency, and then they kind of really tightened down on which films could, and it seems like anymore it's either G or R.
Well, there's also trends, because like I said, girlfriend and I watch a lot of movies just in general anymore because she's such a big film buff. And so, yeah, the horror tends to stray to the top a lot of times because she likes that genre, but we watch other kinds of movies too. And so I was watching all that stuff, for a long time. And it's funny how there's trends in movies that also have changed. Like, watch any 80s comedy where there's enough players, or even when there's very few players. But most 80s comedies will have at least a spot of gratuitous nudity. I have a hard time thinking of a film where there's not just a little bit of nipple or a little bit of boob for his enjoyment, or even the lonely her that's on the side of the theater at the time. They included that. Those were incorporated into films because it was a trend at the time and it was appealing. But at some point along the way, I believe that got viewed as being entirely, misogynistic and chauvinist. And so film producers quit putting that in because they said there's no need for this. And yet what I find, and I think we've discussed this on the podcast before some time ago, but again, what I find to be startling and really quite alarming about our behavior is we'll sit down and say, no, we can't have a movie about two college guys who are off for the summer, who rent a penthouse apartment and have these wild times and, whatever the case may be, and have these gratuitous boobies bumping up and down every couple of frames here, or just, 3 or 4 times in the film. That's offensive. But we're going to allow the most graphic depictions of violence and gore that you could possibly imagine. That's completely passable. In fact, the more of that, the better. This is an attack on our psyche. To me, this is narrow of focus, because violence is really, what do you really want? What are you worried about your kids seeing? And I'm not talking about sex. Again, we're not talking about graphic depictions of intercourse, even though that also is a natural act, but there's consequences that need to be explained when sexual maturity is approaching. But what do you want your kids, what's going to do more harm to them? Seeing a nipple or a set of, college-age girl boobs bounce on the screen for a couple of minutes as they traipse from the bathroom through the party scene, or somebody getting the back of their head blown out and brains all over the place. I mean, because that's commonplace in films anymore. And I feel like, sadly, the conspiracy theorist in me takes over and says this is part of the authentication of desensitizing society. This has been signed off on as, yes, this is good. We're going to allow this because it works to desensitize the masses to violence, which is sadly what we're all about still, and what, the movers and the shakers of the world are all about. So anyway, I'm always troubled by that because of how I was raised to view films. And, Mom, as I think I told you, used to cover my eyes when we go to the theater and she knew a violent scene was coming. But boobs, all day long. I mean, hell, Benny Hill may as well have lived next door and had naked girls on bicycles chasing him all day. She didn't care about nudity because she felt like there was nothing to be ashamed of in that. The human body is what it is. I mean, yeah, there are laws. We need to cover it up, and some people you probably just don't flat want to see based on social trends. But, violence is a different story. So, and I always really felt like as I aged, she got that one perfectly right. She nailed that on the head. So I would hope that a lot of people would follow in my mother's footsteps. I don't have any children, but I know I will often relay that story when I can, because I feel like she was right.
Well, and I think that there's definitely, when they're writing, plots or they're producing movies, I feel like there's kind of like the violence is one of the stars of the show, right? They almost lean too heavily on it just because they want to get a reaction out of the audience. And sometimes it just seems to be ridiculous. I will say another movie that I really liked when I was a kid was Jaws. And I always thought that was extremely gory, but given the plot and the subject matter of a shark attack victims and whatever, I feel like it was necessary. But do I really think that, seeing somebody's head getting blown off in Reservoir Dogs is really necessary?
Well, no. And I think the thing with Jaws is, like Mom used to say about when, again, pre-Hitchcock, pre-Psycho at least, was, when people would get blown away, you'd see the gun come out and go off, and you'd hear the scream and the thud, and that was the end of it. You knew that someone just took a bullet somewhere.
There would be a shadow of somebody falling over or something.
Yeah, I mean, so there was the implication of violence. There was an implied violence because it went along with the story. But seeing the graphic depiction of the bullet going through someone and the blood spraying or whatever, was absolutely, the thought of that was ludicrous. You'd never do that. And then suddenly advance a few decades and de-evolve humanity based on cinematic expression, and here we are today. And I'm sure there are the Tarantinos of the world and others that would say, no, when you're veiling that stuff and not going out of your way to make sure that your film is packed with 3,000, blood baggies that are going off, you're hiding from the truth about violence. I can understand that, and I appreciate that. I think as a filmmaker, like Schindler's List, for example, tells a very serious historical story about, subject matter that's extremely violent. It's war. And not only is it war, in this case, it's genocide and internment camps and all of this stuff. And so, seeing the old man get a Luger point blank, after saying that he's a special worker, and that drives the point home of just exactly how vicious these people and how desensitized they were as en masse to this other group of people. And so that, to me, that delivers a message. And so there is an exception to the rule there artistically. But Jaws, like if that had been made even a decade before, and definitely 2 decades before, if you make Jaws, which by the way was based on real events that happened back, I believe in the 1920s, when bull sharks, which are, I don't remember the term, but they can actually live in both salt and brackish and fresh water. So they can actually swim upstream in freshwater areas and survive for a time before returning to brackish or salt environs. And that happened in New Jersey, where some bull sharks, which are very aggressive sharks, had gotten upstream and were swimming around in some of these rivers, and they took people completely off guard, chewed up a couple kids and probably some guy named Red that lived out by the barn and fixed tractors or whatever, that whole thing. So that's where Peter Benchley actually got the inspiration for that story. But if you make that movie in the 50s, you probably see the shark, and that's terrifying enough. And the shark puppet or whatever they is, you see the guy swimming, and then there's the open jaws, and then the music crescendos, if it's John Williams making the soundtrack still, and that's it. You don't see the leg
disappears,
fall to the bottom of the ocean that's been, severed from the body. You don't see the fountain of blood when it attacks the child in the swimming area like you do in that. So we'd reached a point where, again, for the value, the cinematic value of the movie, I guess, Steven Spielberg even was making movies that had that kind of violence. And I remember, speaking of that movie, that was one my mother would cover my eyes at when we saw it in the theater, was the Quint scene at the end where the shark clamped down on him after hopping on the back of the boat. She just felt that was too much. And for me, it was just, I was enthralled with it because, like, my God, look at the giant. Now it looks hokey to me because the shark's fake, and it's just like, here's Robert Shaw kicking and flailing at this mechanical thing. So I think sometimes that, the reality of everything. Maybe that's how I protect myself from some of the horror movies, because I just immediately remember this is ridiculous. I mean, I really take it. I'm looking at it more from a director's perspective, or an extra that's standing there chewing on a bad egg salad sandwich they got for us that day, watching it being filmed, rather than watching it as, an observer who's in the audience, I guess. So it saves me from some of them. Like, I was never a fan of the Friday the 13th movies at all. To me, talk about your just excuses for gratuitous gore. And so it was just, those were a total put off. And yet we were just on the road, and my girlfriend put 3 on in one of the hotels we were in. Because I don't think we watched anything but horror movies the whole time that we were gone, actually, because we're around Halloween now. And so there's tons of them on. And I was like, all right, whatever. And it was laughable to me. It was a joke. It was just like, this is the biggest cornball fest ever. I mean, I can't really object now in hindsight to the gag gore that's in Friday the 13th, part 3 at least, as I object far more to the backs of heads getting blown off just like it's nothing, one by one by one. Even on television today, it's not regulated by anything like the Motion Picture Academy, like that zombie, and zombies are the perfect target for it too. Zombies and Nazis, because we all want to see them die, right? So there's nothing that's not off limit for either one of those things. And I remember The Walking Dead, watching that show for several seasons, and God, some of the violence in that was just it was just over the top. And then it was, when they really got bad, was the human to human violence. Was that one season where they ended it with the guy that had the big club with the spikes, and that was the bludgeoning. That was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. It's like the end of Casino.
Yes.
When they, oh my gosh, that is just,
when they bury the 2 brothers in the cornfield.
That is terribly violent. I mean, it's marauding, it's so vicious. And that's the stuff that I have more of a problem with. I mean, it doesn't scare me in the sense that I'm not afraid of watching them, have that happen to them. I'm not afraid of knowing that happens to somebody. What I'm afraid of, because I'm just Mr. Zoom Out, is how many people are watching this and completely feeling like this is okay. Like they're being desensitized all the while. They're not consciously able to check themselves and say, hey, Casino, this has been a great movie, but this right here is just, this is beyond me a little bit. I'm not liking this. To me, that's what you have to be able to do to hold your sanity in this.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example. In fact, that was one of the scenes that popped into my mind when you were talking about violence, and that I remember seeing that when I was 13 years old, and it was just, it left a mark on me. But I think that they also, I remember watching, I was a huge fan of like behind the scenes shows when I was a kid. I used to watch a show called Movie Magic. The special effects, part when they would actually shoot special effects on models instead of just clicking a mouse and rendering some computer generated graphic. But I remember I think it was the director of Scarface saying that how they got the idea for having the chainsaw in that one scene where they're going to use the chainsaw on Al Pacino's character, that actually happened in Miami. It was part of a police case, and so they actually were like, "Oh, that's a good one. We're going to have to put that in the film." And so I'm sure mobsters burying somebody alive is probably happened.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt. I mean, real life is probably going to be worse, because we hear stories about people being cut up and dismembered and put in suitcases and found in places. And I mean, there are grisly tales to tell from the world. And like I said, for the sake of telling a true crime story, or for the sake of really driving home the point of a story, Schindler's List comes to mind, because there is some graphic violence in that, even though it's in black and white. But it helps to drive home the point of, look, this is how serious this was. And this is just one example of thousands of people, millions, quite frankly, at the end of the day, for the death toll there, that were just summarily executed in a fashion that was similar. So I think violence obviously as George Carlin once said, well, we're a warlike people. We're a violent species. And we apparently just have not gotten past that. My issue is with the gratuitous violence. Have you ever seen the movie Grand Canyon, for example? So Grand Canyon, lots of players in that. Danny Glover, Kevin Kline, there's a female actress whose name I'm forgetting, but she was pretty big at the time. Steve Martin plays sort of a bit character in that, or he has a smaller role in that. But Steve Martin plays a movie maker who's very well-to-do. He's a Hollywood movie maker. And there's part of the story, without giving it away to people that haven't seen it, I guess, is he makes movies that have gratuitous violence as a part of their plot lines or as part of their cinematic lines, I guess, that they don't really, again, it's not necessary for the plot, but we see, there's even a part in there where he's complaining at his film editors because he's doing a pre-screening, and he jumps up and says, where's the money shot? And the guy's just like, what? And he says, the guy's brain's blowing all over the bus window. Where's the money shot? I want my money shot back. And they said, well, if we leave it in, we're going to get another, high rating and he said, I don't care. It stays in. And so there's even a part in there where they get into the specifics of that. And then someone commits a violent crime against him, and he goes to the hospital and initially has this epiphany where, because of the assault that's occurred and he's been victimized, he now understands that he shouldn't make films that glorify that sort of behavior. But then it's sort of a curious moment, because then after about a week or so in the hospital and he's getting out, he's talking to his friend, who's Kevin Kline in the movie, and he's just nonchalantly talking about making another movie that has all this gore in it. And he says, well, yeah, but what about, I found the light and all that? And he said, that? Oh, fuck that. And he literally just says, that's what he says. And he says, and then he makes reference to a film, and I'm trying to remember the name of it for the life of me, but I can't, it escapes me at the moment. But apparently it's a real film, and it's about a filmmaker who loses his way because of something like this, because instead of telling the story and being the storyteller that he is, he decides to tamp down on that. He decides to put a cloche on that because life told him to, because it's not, but he said, that's not what I do. I'm a filmmaker. So that's what I do. And so this is what I do. And so it's up to the audience to decide whether they want to digest this or not, how they want to take this or not. Mm-hmm. And he kind of walks off set, and I think that's the last you see of him in the movie. But anyway, that comes to mind because it's even been profiled in a motion picture like that, Grand Canyon. I saw that in the theater and own that actually on DVD because I wanted to watch it several years ago, and it was one of those that you couldn't rent or stream anywhere.
Of course.
It was like, well, and that is funny because Cocoon is like that. And I, of course, the immediate thing when you're complaining about, it's not on streaming, the bastards at the, film company, they won't release the rights or they won't sign a handshake because they want too much money. And it actually turns out that in the case of Cocoon, as is the case with a lot of other movies, it had nothing to do with the actual movie rights themselves. Those were attainable with ease for streaming. It was some unsettled score with the film score, that was the problem. And so it literally holds up the entire film from being streamable, and it's only on DVD, VHS, Blu-ray, whatever it's come out on as far as that. So you have to buy the movie on a hard copy in order to view it. And there's a number of examples like that where, for whatever reason, they just don't stream those movies, and they never do. And you usually find out if you do some digging, that's why. So go back and listen to our episode on intellectual property if you want more on my feelings there.
Oh, there you go. Well, there was a movie, speaking of movies that were hard to find, there was a movie that we found somewhere in the 80s. It was called Fortress. And it was about an Australian school teacher and her students who were kidnapped by these masked gunmen.
Oh, with the Santa Claus mask?
Yes!
Oh my God, that is a scary movie. I will give you that. I saw that on a whim back when I was younger, and that freaked me out. Yeah, yes.
And it was based on a true story, Fortress.
Wow.
And then, of course, they flip the script on the bad guys, and they end up killing them all. But it was a really interesting movie. But that was one of those where you had to go to like the huge book. You had to ask the guy behind the counter, and you had to page through. And yeah, Fortress, you had to special order it, and it was like $200.
Yeah, right. Well, it's available from Australia for import, and
right.
There's only one copy sitting on the shelf.
Exactly.
So, that is so funny. I have been wanting to know the name of that movie for decades now, because I remember seeing that film on cable probably shortly after it came out, sometime circa late 80s, right in there, 87, 88. And it seemed like kind of an innocuous storyline. And I could be freaked out by movies when I was younger. Again, I didn't like stuff like that. And so when the mask guys, that bothered me a little bit as a kid and stuff. But I remember the part that really seized me by my, young parts and wouldn't let go was there's a part in there where they escape them.
Yes.
And they run to, and remember, we're talking about like the Australian, I won't say outback because that's outback, but it's the boonies in Australia that isn't the outback. And so the homes are very spaced apart. There's not like a residence right next door.
No. So
they run to this neighboring residence, they flee to this neighboring residence, which is easily acres away from where they were being held captive. And this old woman opens the door, and that's all you see. And she's the woman who's been captured with the kids. Is like, oh my gosh, we've been captured. We need to use your phones. And then slowly out from behind her and from behind the door is the Santa Claus mask.
Yes.
Oh my God, I was on the ground as a kid. I remember that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we could get it today on Amazon, thanks to Jeff Bezos. It always comes full circle, doesn't it?
Thank you, Lord Bezos. Speaking of things that deserve their own horror movie, Jeff Bezos and Elon should have one too. What about him?
I kind of feel like I'm on Coast to Coast.
No, you should. Ray Stevens. Cat's Eye. This is the one.
I didn't realize that Drew Barrymore was in that film, and James Woods.
That's right. Drew Barrymore had her breath stolen by a little imp in the wall in that movie.
Little troll. All right, Jack. Right. Well, until we meet again, stay away from the ghouls and goblins, will you?
Yeah, you too. Happy All Hallows Eve, and we got to find a Fifth Village person for you to dress up like next year.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's one.
The HMO.
Well, it looks like Jack and Michael have finished up their latest chat about all things existence. But if anything they said got your own Existence Brewing, be sure and catch their other talks at existencebrewing.com and drop them an email to share your thoughts using contact@existencebrewing.com.
Existence Brewing.